here's my opening question for you. Would you say that you have anxiety about things in life? Like, how much would you say that you have anxiety? And I think all of us have anxiety about life to an extent. I mean, some in major ways, some in less ways. But all of us go through troubles and difficulties and hardships that just cause anxiety. We don't know what the future brings, or we're in something right now that's a big struggle. And that's just the way that life works, that all of us, because we're human beings, go through some things that cause anxiety about the now and about the future. And where that comes from all different places. I think one of the places it comes from is relationships, right? That maybe you are in a marriage right now that's just difficult, that you're in a season that's difficult, or maybe it's been going on for a long time and you're trying to make things work and it's just you're not on the same page with your spouse. Or maybe it's your relationship with your kids, that it's just a struggle, that they're not kind of doing and acting the way that you would want them to act and to do, and just feels like you're trying everything that you can to parent well and nothing seems to be working. Or maybe your kids are grown and gone and making decisions and you have no control there, and it causes stress and anxiety and worry in life because those relationships matter to you. Or maybe you're experiencing anxiety and difficulty and struggle when it comes to your job. You know, maybe you have a job that you just don't like. Or you have a job where you don't like the work environment, the people that you work with, or your boss, or something along those lines. It's just, I'm not really enjoying what I'm doing right now. You're trying to figure out, do I move on? But you're in this kind of place, right? There's an expression people say, I'm on the struggle bus, right? And I think at all times in our lives, we get on the struggle bus, and we try and get off the struggle bus. But the struggle bus is common to all of us. And sometimes it's big, and sometimes it's small. Even I think about politics coming up, right, in the November election. It's like, I mean, that's months away, but there's a little bit of anxiety with me of like, what's going to happen? And is there going to be even more division in our country after the election, no matter who wins? And so there's things about that are concerning. I leave on Tuesday to go to Kenya. And so we're flying 8,000 miles away from Charleston. There's 10 people on our team, 5 of whom are 18 or 19 years old. What could possibly go wrong, right? Like, think about the decisions that you are making at 18 and 19, and those people are making those decisions in a third world country. So pray for us. I want to take you back to 722 BC, okay? And it was a time of incredible anxiety, incredible difficulty. The nation of Israel is divided in this point into 2 parts. There's the northern kingdom, which is called Israel, and the southern kingdom, which is actually called Judah. And so the northern kingdom had been rebelling against God and following other gods and just doing things that were not in God's will. And Judah, the southern kingdom, was doing a little bit better, but not too much better, right? They were not as bad off, but they were still kind of rebelling against God to an extent. And so what God did is he sent an army called the Assyrians, or he allowed the Assyrian army to come and invade Israel. And so they come from the north and they invade Israel, right? And they conquer Israel, the northern kingdom of Israel, and they conquer Israel and all the towns there in Samaria and all of that stuff. And they begin to take their men and they ship some of them away and they keep some of them, and they ship some of the women away and they keep some of them, they ship some of the kids away. And they basically just cause chaos because it's easier to rule a country if families aren't together and the people are in chaos. And so the Assyrian army is marching down. They're marching south, and they're getting closer and closer to Jerusalem. And Jerusalem is in the southern kingdom of Judah. And so as they're marching down, they're beginning to take these small towns. And then they end up basically on the doorstep of Jerusalem. Now I want you to imagine that you are the king of Israel. Your name is Hezekiah. Hezekiah is the king of Israel. And so he's heard reports, the Assyrians are coming, and they're marching, and they're taking cities, and they're taking them very easily, and they're getting closer and closer to Jerusalem. And you're outmanned, and you're outgunned, or outhorsed, or outcharioted, so to speak, and they're coming. And your anxiety level is super high because you're in charge of the southern kingdom of Judah, of this part of God's people. And so what Hezekiah does is he tries to negotiate. He sends some messengers. He says, hey, I can give you some food. I can give you some gold. I can give you this. And he starts to take some things and offer it. And the king of Assyria goes, we're taking the whole city. We're taking the whole thing. So the Assyrians speak one language, and the Israelites, the people in Judah, in Hezekiah's domain there, they speak Hebrew. They speak another language. And so the people, this invading army, realizes this. And they're like, you know what? We're going to go send a message to the people of Israel. The people, and when I say Israel, it's the people of Judah, actually, the southern kingdom. And this is what they say. And this is kind of long, but I'm going to read this and hang with me. Okay? And there's some names in here that I'm going to butcher, but you don't know how they're pronounced anyway, so it doesn't matter. So put the first verse up there. Anybody want to take a stab at that second, the name there? Babshakah, I think that's what we're going with. So then Babshakah, okay, stood and called out in a loud voice in the language of Judah, hear the word of the great king, the king of Assyria. So he is outside the wall, and he is shouting to the people who are on the wall, manning the wall. Thus says the king, do not let Hezekiah deceive you, for he will not be able to deliver you out of my hand. Do not let Hezekiah make you trust in the Lord by saying, the Lord will surely deliver us, and this city will not be given into that king of Assyria. Do not listen to Hezekiah, for thus says the king of Assyria, make your peace with me and come out to me. Then each one of you will eat of his own vine, and each one of his own fig tree, and each one of you will drink water of his own cistern, until I come and take you away to a land like your own, a land of grain and wine, a land of bread and vineyards, a land of olive trees and honey, that you may live and not die. So he's talking directly to the people in Jerusalem and saying, come on out. I'm going to send you to a great land. It's like dropping leaflets over an enemy city, saying it's going to be great. Come on out. Don't listen to Hezekiah who says, trust in the Lord. And do not listen to Hezekiah when he misleads you by saying the Lord will deliver us. Has any of the gods of the nations ever delivered his land out of the hand of the king of Assyria? Where were the gods of Hamath? Where were the gods of Arpad? Where are the gods of Seraphim, of Hena, of Aviah? Have they delivered Samaria out of my hand? Who among the gods of the lands have delivered their lands out of my hand, that the Lord should deliver Jerusalem out of my hand? So this messenger is saying, look, the king of Assyria has obliterated everybody. Everybody along the way says, my God's going to rescue me. And none of them did. And we took their land and we killed them and we moved on. And I'm giving you a better choice. Forfeit, and I will give you places to live with grain and milk and wine in other lands. It'll be better. It's pretty persuading, isn't it? And you're Hezekiah, and you're going, what do I do? Because I know the Lord wants me to stay and to fight, but I'm not sure we can win. I'm pretty sure we can't win, and I don't know what to do. Talk about anxiety. That's a man who is faced with extreme anxiety because trouble and difficulty is all around him. If this is your first time at River Ridge, or you haven't been here in about 3 weeks or so, we're in this series called Divine Identity. And we're looking at different portraits and pictures of who God is. And today the picture that we're looking at of God is my refuge. God is my refuge. We've talked about God as I am. We've talked about God as our Abba Father or Daddy. And today we're talking about God as our refuge. And Hezekiah needs something. He needs God as a refuge. In the same way that depending on what you're going through and what struggle bus you're on at the moment, that you need God as a refuge as well. And so one of the beautiful things of Scripture is that we actually have a picture of what Hezekiah is kind of going through and thinking, because there's a psalm that was written at the same time. And so we're going to look at Psalm 46 today, okay? And it's titled, God is My Fortress. And I wanted to look at this psalm today because the backdrop or the background of it, or I want to look at 2 Kings because the backdrop of Psalm 46 is 2 Kings and what is going on just outside the walls of Jerusalem. And so this psalm is titled, God is Our Fortress. And depending on your tradition of where you grew up, there's a hymn that Martin Luther wrote called, A Mighty Fortress is Our God. If you want to sing that or hum that, it's a great tune. A mighty fortress is our God. And he wrote that based on Psalm 46. And it begins this way. God is our refuge and strength, a very present help in trouble. Therefore, we will not fear, though the earth gives way, though the mountains be moved into the heart of the sea, though its waters roar and foam, though the mountains tremble at its swelling. Selah. So the first characteristic that we're going to talk about, or we're going to talk about God is our refuge. And what we're going to do is we're going to look at 3 different ways that he is our refuge. And to understand refuge, and just in its most basic sense, I want to tell you a story. And this was from a number of years ago. Our family, our kids were little. We just had Emily and Riley. So Emily is 2.5, Riley is half. He's 6 months old. And my parents came in from Ohio, and we said, let's go to Snowshoe, right? We were living in Morgantown at the time. Let's go to Snowshoe, and we rented, I think it was called like the Outback Cabin or something like that. But it was this place that was away from the main part of the top of Snowshoe Mountain. And this was October. And so we get there, we check in. They say, you're going to hike out, follow this trail, take a right at that sign, go a little farther. It's about a mile out that way, and you'll find this kind of Outback Cabin out there. We're like, okay. So we start to walk a little bit, and it starts to snow, right? And this is the middle of October. We were not expecting snow. For you youngins, there were no such things as cell phones to figure out the weather on your phone. So we didn't check what the weather was. And so it started snowing, and we were getting a little concerned. And so we had Emily, she was walking with us, and then Riley was in like one of those backpacks with the legs that stick through on my back. But as we start to go, it gets snowier and snowier. Like this is not going to work. We got a problem here. And then we also realized we're lost. Like the snow has kind of disoriented us. And so, anyway, so what we did is we had a backpack that had all our clothes in. We take all of our clothes out. We put all of our clothes on, and then we take Riley and we put him in like a regular old backpack with his head sticking out, right? And it looks like this. So it has snowed that much in just 15 minutes. Riley is peeking out of the backpack. We've got like some clothes stuffed in the bottom, like between his legs so he can stand up because he can't stand because he's only 6 months old. And then we actually took another picture of all of us lined up if you want to see what that looks like. So there we are. Emily's pretty excited too, so she's a little too big for that backpack. So, all right, take the picture off so they listen to me. Okay, so here's the thing, is we're walking, it's snowing, we're struggling, and we can't find where we're supposed to end up. And we have not been to Snowshoe before, and we're very disoriented. And we're going, we're like, this is not good, right? And you just kind of get disoriented with the trails and the trees and all that. Finally, we see somebody who's working on a pipe or something, and we're like, we're looking for this place called the Outback Cabin or something like that. Do you know what they say? He goes, yeah, it's fine. You go up over this ridge, and just down that trail, you'll be there. And sure enough, we did, right? And we got there, and here's what I want us to see related to Psalm 46, and the Lord is my refuge, is that cabin was our refuge. Like we went into the cabin, and everything was fine. That cabin was protecting us from the storm, the snowstorm that was raging outside of what was going on. God is our refuge. And there's 3 kind of implications of it. The first is this, is God protects me. God protects me. Because God is my refuge, that means that he protects me. In verse 1, it says, he is my very present help. Right? So he is my present help. He helps us right now in the moment, whatever's going on. He provides a refuge for us. And here's the thing, is when we walked into that cabin, we were protected from the storm, but, and this is why I want to tell this story, right? We were protected from the storm, but the storm didn't stop, right? God is our refuge, and he will protect you from the storm that is going on, but that doesn't mean that the storm stops, right? And that's what it means for him to be our refuge. He protects us from what we need to be protected from. The other part, I want to go back to verse 1 for a minute. It says, God is our refuge and strength, a very present help in trouble. It says that he's our strength, right? I know as you look at my body, you probably can't tell us, but I don't lift weights. You look at me, you go, he probably lifts. I don't lift weights, right? I've lifted weights a couple times in my life, not very many times, but there was a time that I was lifting weights. I was with a buddy, and like I said, I don't really like lifting weights, but I'm like, hey, I'll go with you. We'll see how it's like and see if I like it kind of thing. And so I go to do the bench press, and I get one of those bars, and I put a 50-pound weight on one side and a 50-pound weight on the other side. I'm like, certainly I can bench press 100 pounds. Like, I got this, right? So I put it on the little, bar thing, and I lie down, and I push it up, and I pull it over, and I put it down on my chest. And I can't get that thing up. Like, I am like, oh my gosh, I'm such a weakling, right? I'm pushing, it's crushing my chest. I'm like, I don't know what to do here. But I've been around enough gyms. I'm like, oh, I know the safe word. Spot! Right? And so my buddy comes over, and he lifts the bar up and puts it back on. And I'm like, how much of a weakling am I? I can't even lift 100 pounds. And he goes, well, the bar weighs 45 pounds. I'm like, that does make a difference now, doesn't it? Yes. But you see, I couldn't lift that bar by myself. Right? I needed somebody else's strength to lift that bar with me, right? That is part of when God is our refuge. I love the way that Paul puts it in 2 Corinthians chapter 4. He says this. He writes, we are hard-pressed on every side, but not crushed, perplexed, but not in despair, persecuted, but not abandoned, struck down, but not destroyed. You see, there comes a point in our lives where we can't do it on our own strength, and we need God's strength to come and help us to get us through whatever the storm is. That's what it means that he is the refuge. If you're looking in your printed Bible, you'll notice that there's a word between verse 3 and verse 4, and also after verse 7 and verse 11. It's the word Selah, right? And you may have maybe you've seen that as you've read other Psalms. But the word Selah, it means to pause. And it could have been a musical term, like, hey, there's a pause here, or a musical break. But as we look at it, just means like read the words and then pause and reflect on them. And so the Selah comes up 3 times in Psalm 46. And so each time it comes up, we're actually going to do this as a church family today, is we're going to pause. And so I want to give you a minute to pause and just to reflect. And here's what I want to guide your reflection on. Is we're in church, and so when I say, who is your refuge, your answer would be, well, I'm in church. Of course, the answer is God is my refuge, right? But here's what I want you to think about. What are the other things in your life that you go to as a refuge? And maybe they're kind of not bad things. Maybe they're terrible things, right? But I want you to just take a moment, and we're going to play some soft music, and I just want to take a Selah and ask you that question. What do you go for when God is not your refuge, when he should be your refuge? And just want you to think about that just for a moment. The psalmist continues, verse 4, there's a river whose stream make glad the city of God, the holy habitation of the Most High. So we've got what happens in 2 Kings, and then we have what happens in Psalm 46. And you go, well, how do they put that together? This is one of the reasons that people smarter than me put this together, is it talks about there's a river whose streams make glad the city of God. So the city of God is Jerusalem, and it was a great place to defend. But one of the problems with Jerusalem is it didn't have a natural water source that fed it, right? And so it could potentially be suspect to somebody surrounding it and taking it over based on just isolating it. And so what Hezekiah did prior to this is he dug a tunnel, which is called Hezekiah's tunnel. You can find it in the Bible, and it's the closest water source was about a third of a mile outside of the city. And so they dug this tunnel from inside the walls of Jerusalem to outside to this spring, right? And so Stacy and I were actually in Jerusalem a little over a year ago, May and June of last year, and we got to go in Hezekiah's tunnel. And it was super cool. It's about this wide. There are some terms we had to turn sideways, and it connects the city of Jerusalem to this spring, right? And it was one of these kind of things that they worked on for a long time to protect the city. And so this says, there is a river whose stream make glad the city of God. That's the river that Psalm 43 refers to. And it says this in verse 5. It says, God is in the midst of her. She shall not be moved. God will help her when morning dawns. And so it says God is in the middle of Jerusalem. And so here's the second part of what it means that God is my refuge. It's God is with me. Now remember to look at this psalm through the eyes of Hezekiah and all that he's going through and what he's seeing on the horizon as the Assyrian army is beginning to invade and to come towards him, right? Then it says this. It says, the nations rage, the kingdoms totter. He utters his voice, the earth melts. Right? The Assyrians have this world empire that they're just taking over everything. No one can stop them, no matter who they cry out to. And then it says, verse 7, the Lord of hosts is with us. The God of Jacob is our fortress. A fortress is just a gigantic refuge, a battle refuge. It is a fortress. He says, but I love that line. It says, the Lord of hosts is with us. That God is with us. When we say God is my refuge, it means that God is with us in our pain, in our struggle, on our struggle bus, in our anxiety, whatever it is, that God is with us in that. And he's the one who can grant peace to us in the midst of that storm because he is a refuge. There was a number of years ago where a friend and I were just in a difficult time. And this friend would call from time to time and just kind of let me have it or write a letter and let me have it. And it was a struggle. I mean, it was a close friend. It was a struggle, right? It was causing anxiety. It was a storm I didn't want to be in. And there's times when Stacy would say to me, Matt, are you okay? And I would say, I'm not. And what I would do, and when she'd ask that, or when I would go and walk around our neighborhood, and I would just kind of pray, and I'm like, is this my issue? Is this other person's issue? I don't know what to do with this. But in those times, I was seeking God as my refuge, and he was with me in those prayer walks, and the peace of God would come over me in ways that were just supernatural, because the storm, this relationship storm, was raging all around me. Then after verse 7, it says, Selah. So we're going to have a second Selah of about a minute long. And here's what I want you to think about. I want you to lay whatever burdens, whatever storms, whatever struggles you're going through, just to put those at the foot of the cross. Put those at his feet and invite him, say, be with me in this struggle. There's a third way that God is our refuge and what that means. And I'm going to give it to you up front, and then we're going to read the verses so you can see it in the verses at the end of Psalm 46. And it's this, is that God helps me. God is my refuge means that God helps me. Here's how it's highlighted in Psalm 46. Come and see the works of the Lord, the desolations he has brought to the earth. He makes wars cease to the ends of the earth. He breaks the bow and shatters the spear. He burns the shields with fire. You know, at this point in time, remember, the Assyrians are right out there. They're right in view. And Hezekiah is giving this psalm or saying this psalm or singing this psalm. This is what he is looking to, right? And he's remembering God was faithful in the past, and God will be faithful now, and God will be faithful in the future. He's made wars cease. He's shattered bows. He's shattered spears. He has won victories before, and God is going to win this victory as well. And then in verse 10, it says, "Be still and know that I am God. I will be exalted among the nations. I will be exalted in the earth." That's a verse that actually may be very familiar to many of you. Be still and know that I am God. And typically we use that verse a little bit out of context. It's like we just need to be still before the Lord. Just have a daily devotion. Just have a daily quiet time. Be still before God on a regular basis. And that is certainly true, but that's not what this verse is saying. Right? This is not saying spend time in silent prayer every day. It's saying be still and know that I am God, because I will be exalted among the nations. I will be exalted on the earth. What he's saying is, I am in control. We talked about this back on May 5th, if you remember. We talked about, why do I have to be in control? And God is saying, I'm in control. You humans are not in control. Be still. You don't need to do anything, because I am going to take care of this. That's what God is saying in this moment. That's what it means that he is our refuge. I'm going to take care of this. So then the question is, did he? What happened to Hezekiah and the people of Jerusalem? Here's what happens. This is 2 Kings chapter 19. I'm going to begin in verse 32. It's a bit of a longer verse section. It says this: "Therefore, this is what the Lord says concerning the king of Assyria. He will not enter this city or shoot an arrow here. He will not come before it with shield or build a siege ramp against it. By the way that he came, he will return. He will not enter this city, declares the Lord. I will defend this city and save it for my sake and for the sake of David, my servant." This is God speaking and saying, I will defend this city. You be still. Verse 35. That night an angel of the Lord went out and put to death 185,000 men in the Assyrian camp. When the people got up the next morning, there were all dead bodies. So Sennacherib, king of Assyria, broke camp and withdrew, and he returned to Nineveh and stayed there. And so he withdrew. He went all the way back to his own country, to Nineveh. God rescued them. God is our refuge. Then it finishes up, verse 11. It says this: "The Lord Almighty is with us. The God of Jacob is our fortress." Selah.